Hi, readers. It's Lori. Welcome back to my channel, Books, Ink, and Paper. I'm so glad you're here today because I'm talking about my February stats and reading wrap up for the month of February 2026. I had a good reading month. I enjoyed many of these books very much. I had sort of an eclectic group of books, I think, so that was fun. I have one book that I don't usually add these to my reading experience with you, but I am going to do it this time because I'll tell you why in a minute. But let's get started. So, in the month of February, I read 5 books, which made me very happy. And the average time for me to read those books was 11 days. One of them really pulled that back hard because it took me a bit longer to read it than the others, and I think I know why. I read a total of 1,188 pages. There were a couple that were super short, and I'm happy with that. I read one book that was digital this time, and that was an ebook that I purchased that I have reread now. Also, I made it through several categories with these choices: mysterious, tense, lighthearted, informative, hopeful, emotional, dark, and adventurous. And some of them were dark for very different reasons, let's just say. So my slow-paced book was the book that I read for Mardi Gras Readathon as a group read, but that was 25% of the pie, along with medium percent, which was 50%, and fast pace was 25% as well. So it was a good mix, I would say, and medium is my general pace, so no surprises there. The page numbers for these books, I read 40% of them that were under 300 pages, and 60% of them were 300 pages up through 499 pages. If I read anything over 500 pages, which I will be doing this year, then it'll, of course, go to that other category. 100% fiction. 100% fiction. I know. I'm going to get there. I have some that I really want to get to, and yeah, it's just me. It just is what it is. But the genres that I read in these books were LGBTQIA+, magical realism, thriller, romance, mystery, literary, fantasy, and contemporary. And each one of those had one book in that category. So I really did kind of run the gamut of those this time. So this is what's interesting about this is the format must not count in the pages read if it's digital, because the format says I read 1,472 pages. And you heard me say earlier 1188, right? So that is something I haven't noticed before until just today, and I'm curious about it. So I'm assuming that my 20% reading in digital, which was one book, is what boosted that up to 1472. That's like 300 pages, right? And then print, of course, was 80%. And they were all in English, which doesn't surprise you. And my average star rating for the month of February was 4.5. So it was a good reading month. And now we will talk about the books that I actually read and in what order I read them. So, ready or not, here we go. The first book I read was the digital. This is Shiver by Allie Reynolds. This was a reread for me. And I had purchased it on my Nook because it was on sale, and I had forgotten that I had read it before. So I realized, as you know, because I've said, I realized that I had already read it and I reread it, and I'm really happy that I did. You know, I do want to do more rereads this year of books that I've enjoyed, and I did enjoy this. I gave it 4 stars. And then later I was thinking about it again after, because I had kind of just gone, oh, and I rated it 4 stars the first time too. As I thought about it again, it was a little slower. It probably was more of a 3.5 for me when I think it through, but it was good. And it was perfect timing because these were snowboarders in this particular novel, and they were back timeline from when they were competing and in different competitions, and then current timeline where they happened to be trapped in this building where they were all invited to come back together into, and they have no idea who invited them or for what reasons or purposes. So you would go back and forth from past to present day situation. Past was challenging for them because they were always trying to outperform each other as snowboarders. And of course, there were times where there were, risks of injuries and infighting conversations. And there were they were really young and wild in some ways too. And then in the current day, they're back together, and one of them was not able to come back to gather with them for reasons I don't know that I need to share with you, but it is in the synopsis. And so they then discover that somebody's trapped them in this place and they want something from them, but they don't know who that somebody is. And so to me, it was very propulsive, which I think is what made me give it 4 stars. Again, I was hanging on with it. I really enjoyed it, and I really wanted to find out what happened to these people because I remembered, but I was like, oh, did this happen? Did that happen? Second guessing myself. However, when I thought it through later, it did kind of get pretty repetitive in the sense of they're here and they're experiencing this. They go back there and they're experiencing the same thing day after day after day after day. And a friend of mine was telling me that her friend didn't like it at all. My friend Liz, and I can get that. There's a lot of people that don't like it at all, but I did enjoy it, and I'm glad I reread it. And I don't know if I would reread it again, but I would recommend it if you like that sort of thing. So it's very closed in one part of it. They're all, kind of stuck in the same place and have to figure a way to to do something that they can figure out what's happening. So I enjoyed that a lot. The second one that I finished actually was one that I started in January. This is Little French Bistro and Vina George. This was our group read for the Mardi Gras Readathon, as you know. And it took me a little while to get into this, and I also had a lot of other things going on. January and even February, at New Year, new start, new clients, new things happened. I ended up annotating this, and because it is a used copy and it's not in great shape, I don't plan to sell it. But I wrote little notes in on occasion, and I underlined certain passages because I was too tired to get up and find my liners to be able to do that. But nevertheless, I enjoyed this a lot. This is a dark beginning, and we talked about this in the group read wrap up, but this is a super dark beginning. And if you've seen that on YouTube and you don't want spoilers, don't watch it, because there's definitely spoilers there about what's going to happen. Although we didn't reveal the very ending because Sue Jackson, was joining us and she had not finished. But this is about a woman who's been living in Germany with her partner, and now I won't be able to remember their names. Her name is Marianne or Marianne, and she is with a guy who's really not likable at all. And she's been married to him for a while. He's very challenging. I don't think he physically was abusive to her, but he was definitely mentally abusive to her. So his name is Lothar. There are a lot of characters in this book. It is really hard at times to remember who each one of them is and what their role is in these lives. But she begins by leaving Lothar, and she is, I'm just going to say it because there's a sensitivity warning here that I think you need to know. She is contemplating ending her life rather than going back to that relationship. She doesn't, so that's the good news. And she ends up at this place in a small community, and she meets people there, and they nurture her, and they get to know her, and they really like her, and she likes, each of them. They all have sort of a certain role that they play with her, and I really enjoyed this a lot more than I thought. As I got farther into it and past the dark part in the beginning, I really felt like this one was beautifully done. Literary fiction, I would say, not historical. Just a beautiful, like an atmospheric depiction, but also you got to know these people, you got to know some of their past, you got to know why they were doing what they did and what made them sort of tick, in other words, and how they supported her was just lovely. And I really was happy that I got to it. So there is a Little Paris Bookshop novel by Nina George, and I intend to read that too, because if this one was that good, then I'm all in. So this is the one I would not normally share with you in a reading wrap up, But I am doing so because I bought two of these, one for us and one for our youngest granddaughter. F is for Friends, an alphabet book. Now, the reason I'm bringing this forward is because she was riveted by this book. I read it to her. Her mother read it to her. They read it. They were here for the afternoon. They read it, I think, 5 times. She really liked this a lot, which is no surprise to me because I think genetically, because we loved Friends, we passed that along to her, right? But it's so cute. It really is. And so, literally, this is an alphabet book where there's a letter for each thing. C is for couch, pivot, right? You remember? Pivot. That's not that couch, but that's actually the one in the coffee shop. I is for ice. Phoebe makes sure there's plenty of ice at the party. J is for jam. Monica makes jars of jams and Joey eats some. Yes, there's just so many things here that if you loved the Friends series, you will love this, but also the ability to introduce it to your little ones. This is a golden book, which I haven't purchased in a long time. We do have all the little Funko Pops of these people, and she really loves them too. But she enjoyed this very, very much. So we gave this collectively a 5-star rating, and we highly recommend it. And I am just really glad that we got a copy for our kids here when they visit, but also for her to keep forever. So she loves books. We're so grateful that she does because, not every kid does, but she absolutely loves books. And most all of the grandkids do. I mean, I'm really lucky in that regard. Okay, then I buddy read The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett with my friend Andy. And Andy has really been a light in my life in terms of recommending some books that I have enjoyed very, very much, but also in just being a good friend. And she leads our book club, and she's just incredible. And we read this together. You can stop that. I got my highlighters out for this one, guys. I really, really did. I was not going to do that again. We read this pretty quickly, much more quickly than I thought. It was pretty unput downable for me, and I think the same for her. We stayed on pace. I was worried I was going to hold her back, and we were both on the same pace. I wanted to read this all the time, and quite frankly, I had gotten it on my Libby app for me to read it on Kindle, but I decided that I really wanted to devour it and to annotate it because I was enjoying it so much. So this one is about a number of people. The first one being Denios Cole, and then there is an immunist who is Ana Gosa Dulabra, but they call her Anna. So she's the index investigator of the Dertana Canton. So these are very well grouped into different categories of people's level of expertise and honor, I guess, and also the various places. It's very confusing for me to be able to say this to you about what this book is about because fantasy is hard for me to retain and hard for me to pronounce some of the things that people have created in this space. So there's that. But I will just tell you that Cole, Kol, we'll call him that because that's what Andy mostly called him, and I called him Din, but that's fine. And then Anna work together to try to find out what has happened to this man who has been killed in a very unique way. Again, fantasy brings so much into the space that you just think, who would have thought of this? But this guy, who's pretty reputable, he's very, kind of higher up in the hierarchy, is found dead in this home that doesn't belong to him. And there's no one knowing what occurred and who might have killed him in this weird way. Din and Anna are in charge of trying to figure this out. So Din is that initial inspector who remembers everything. So he smells some kind of a scent, and then he can sort of record all of the things that he sees in a crime scene room, which is what, of course, he's trained to do. That's what his category would suggest that he would do. And then Anna takes that information from Din and decides what she thinks happened. Anna, I don't think is blind, but she wears a blindfold all the time. I assume it's to kind of screen out, things that would distract her, but I'm not even really sure. Andy and I talked about the Shoeboxer the whole time, but I'm not sure that I ever really shared as much as I was thinking. And now, as I'm recapping it, I'm like, I don't know what happened there. I don't know what that was called. I don't know this. I don't know that. But I will tell you that what I do know is this was a 5-star read for me. And we're going to go on and read the second one in the series, which is called A Drop of Corruption, very soon. So I had gotten that one not long ago, and then this one I've had for a bit. And I really was surprised at how much I enjoyed this book. It has a very small, tiny print on the back. Again, no jacket cover and no information inside the end pages, but it's very well liked. It's very well rated. What I didn't realize and didn't look at on the back synopsis, because it's tiny and I didn't read it, when I was reading this, I said to Andy, this reminds me of Sherlock Holmes and Watson. It's like she's Sherlock and he's Watson, and he's giving, he's looking, he's searching, he's doing all this stuff, and she's evaluating and trying to figure out what happened. And indeed, she's way ahead of everybody else. As I looked at this today to prepare for you, it says a Holmes and Watson style detective duo take the stage in this fantasy with a mystery. That's exactly all you need to know to be able to decide if this is going to work for you. But I have always been a fan since I was a young girl of Sherlock Holmes and Watson. I still have a number of those on my shelves as well as in my digital copies, and I thought this was fantastic. So I can't wait to read the next one, which I think we're doing in April. There you go. Last one is one that I got from my library, and I shared it with you in that library haul. And I wasn't planning to read it, but one day I was sitting here, it was still on my coffee table where I often, sit when I'm relaxing, and I said, gosh, I could probably read that in one day. It's very short, it's very small. And I did indeed do that. So that was my first read in a day book for a while. And I'm happy to say I've had another one since. But nevertheless, this one is a midnight pastry shop called Huawodong. Huawdong. I don't know. But this is by Lee Anthwa. I was surprised by this one a lot. I didn't realize it was going to be so dark. This one I gave 4 stars to, but it is really difficult reading. So it is about a young woman whose grandmother dies. She had a great relationship with her grandmother as she was growing up, and she goes to the executor of the will, and she's told that, and I mentioned this when I got the book and hauled it, she's told that her grandmother's pastry shop has been left to her, and she has to keep it for at least 30 days and then decide what to do with it so she can then sell it or do whatever she wants to do. So she starts to go into the pastry shop, and a man comes in, and she is, like connecting with him because he knew her grandmother and he knew kind of what was expected of the pastry shop. And then she discovers that people start to come into the pastry shop asking for a specific thing that they want to eat, and that they are now ready to transition into their reincarnation. So that's what makes this dark, because they are all coming in and they're all, of course, telling her their story about how their lives unfolded. So I don't know that that is in the synopsis, but I'm going to tell you that for another reason, because again, there's a bit of sadness that comes to that, and sensitivity to a lot of people, I would say, for the death of someone that they care about deeply. I have made the choice to share this with you, but I also am going to say, if you want to, I'll give you a time where you can come back so you can pause it. But what we discover outside of the fact that they choose a pastry in her shop is that they've all come into this space for this sort of last pastry that they loved from her grandmother, and also to move into reincarnation, which you do know by the synopsis. But the sensitivity warning that I just want to make sure I share with you is that they then tell their stories, each of them, about their lives and about how they died, which can be very sensitive to a lot of people. And so I was recognizing as I was reading it, devouring it essentially, that I was also feeling a very emotional charge with this. And that while I loved it and it was 4 stars and I really enjoyed it, it was emotionally at times very difficult for me. So that I will lay out there for you. But if you didn't watch or listen to that other part, it's something you need to just be cognizant of, I think. So I'm happy that I read it. Again, I read it in pretty much a half a day, I guess, essentially, because I started it in late morning and I finished it during was it BAFTA Awards? It was some award show that was on the TV. I was very moved by it. I think there were tears, although I didn't give it a 5 star. I don't know what made me not do that, but I think there were a few tears at the end. So I liked the way it was developed. I liked the way it wrapped up. And so I would read another book by this author for sure. So that is my reading wrap up for these novels that I read this month, and I hope that you enjoyed this. If you've read any of these, I'm excited to hear what you thought about them or if any of them are on your shelf. I really do recommend that you read F is for Friends if you're a Friends fan, because it's just super cute and it reminds you of all those things. And also, there's one about Seinfeld, the Goonies, and so Gremlins. There's a lot of these, apparently. I had no idea that they've adapted. All right. Thanks so much for joining me. Let me know what you read in the month of February. If none of these appealed to you, let me know, what did, so I can kind of put those on my list as well. And as always, happy reading. Bye.